We'll all enjoy this conference and make new connections and wonderful research partnerships by the time we leave here. Yesterday I landed here and it's a beautiful and vibrant city, and hope you'll enjoy part of that city as well during our time here. Next year, HETL conference is in Aberdeen at my university in Scotland, and I hope all of you will come there to continue our friendships and collaborations. So for now, I think on behalf of the Higher Education Teaching and Learning Association HETL Conference, I really like to thank the country, the city, and the organizers and our host institutions to organize this conference, and let's all enjoy together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Amda for her speech. Now, we can go into our keynote speakers, and today we have a lot of good titles, and I want to welcome to Mr. Mehmet Fatih Özmantar, Professor Fatih Özmantar. He will make a presentation about innovation culture in education, dimensions, formations, and yes, thank you. Please welcome Mr. Fatih Özmantar, Mehmet Fatih Özmantar.
Hello, everybody. Do you hear me? I think yes. Well, I must admit that it is my first time making presentation while watching myself. So it's a bit different and, in fact, a strange experience. But in somehow, we are living in a world of technology changes. I must, at some point in my life, going to experience this, and it is now, in this occasion, I'm going to experience. Right, I would like to welcome you all to this opening session. I am given like 1 hour presentation time, and I would not like to force your patience, so I'm going to make quick presentation, and afterwards, well, hopefully I'm going to finish in a timely manner. And afterwards, I would like to receive your questions, and hopefully we are going to make a fruitful presentation here. Right, the title of my presentation is Innovation Culture in Educational Institutions, but because it was going to be too large title, so I was needed to cut. And I sacrificed the institution, knowing that in education comes somehow in relation to institutions. And I'm going to talk about dimensions, formations, and connections. Well, before starting my presentation, I have to tell you one thing, quite personal, that my father is a quite traditional person. I know there's nothing to do with this conference, but let me tell you one thing, that I don't know when he decided, but somehow my father, every single Sunday, without any omission, visits my grandpa, without any omission. And it is kind of, untold times, and somehow decided, I don't know when and in what connections, but my father believes that if you don't really comply with this practice, visiting your fathers or grandpa on Sundays, it's a kind of breach of family roots, or it's not simply like unacceptable, And I have older brother, he is very keen to, make this practice happening every Sunday. And my father loves him more than me because of this. I know it is a bit strange, but it's true. But I somehow couldn't really see any point visiting every Sunday to, grandpa or my family, because what happens is you wake up in the morning, go to your family, had breakfast, had lunch, had, dinner, and basically between these two events, you do nothing. Well, yes, you have little chats and, talk about things, but then you're finished and come back home, and the whole day really spent like this, and every single Monday repeating itself over and over again. I'm from Gaziantep, which is in the southeast of Turkey. which is very well known with the pistachios. Did you ever hear pistachio farms? It is quite valuable and it's a really high price. And my father has a humble pistachio farm, and my father indicates, not directly told me ever, but indicates that my brother has a high chance to, be given this farm after him. He's kind of trying to punish me somehow because I'm not practicing the way as he wanted. I didn't know why I told you this story, because in last Sunday, I didn't go to my father and he was telling me, why didn't you come? You're always like this from your childhood. And that is why I just wanted to share my sore heart feelings. Anyway, I'm going to get back to this little story in a while, but at the moment, I would like to, with your permission, move on. Right. We can make different and extensive definitions of innovation, but in a nutshell, innovation is producing meaningful solutions to the real problems. But the key point here is that it must be a real problem that we are trying to find a solution. But not only solution that we are after, we also want to produce value. Well, we are going to talk about this in a while. If I have to really summarize what innovation is all about, I will probably come up with these 3 points. Producing something new, it could be tangible, it could be concrete, or improving a practice, that's something we do, making it working better, or developing a new way of thinking. And innovation could be really achieved on the way of that we really think and we perform. Well, what is the purpose of innovation? Well, there is this common idea that people somehow feel the trap of making something for the sake of doing something different. But innovation is not all about something being a different, somehow producing something different. You've got to really respond a need for producing this difference. For the purpose of improvements or for the purpose of betterment. I assume that before the opening speakers also already mentioned that we are working in a world of fast changes. We are experiencing these changes on the daily basis. So why we needed innovation in education? Well, there are all sorts of reasons, but 5 of them researchers repeatedly refer to. One is globalization and competitiveness. As you see, the world is becoming shrinking every single day, and we are getting close connections with the other sides of the world. And that really forces us to make a competition to produce goods or to attract people's attention, to produce something that people would want to buy, but even if they don't need it. So these are the issues that really makes us educators to produce something innovative. And the second one is societal needs and expectations, and families' expectations. Society's expectations are quite different from the past. They want their students, their kids, their children become an active part of knowledge society, which is quite understandable. So we can't really supply the demands of families or society by repeating our past practices. So in this sense, we have to really produce something innovative. They want to see something different, but in a meaningful and sensible ways. And technological advancements, which is quite apparent in our lives, demands of business world. An interesting data comes a couple of years ago. National Westminster Bank, they reported that they spend every year more than £15 million for educating newcomers in terms of 4 basic operations. So they are questioning the supply of education. We are making our taxes, we are paying our taxes. Why education system doesn't produce workers or workforce that we basically need. And demands of business world really pushes educators to produce meaningful solutions. Last but not the least, international comparative studies of student achievements like PISA and TIMSS, they produce alarming results and eye-opening results, if I may say so. For example, in every country has their lessons, but in Turkish context, we see that 52% of our students at the age of 15, like retired, they are performing at or under tier 1 or tier 0, which is really an issue we have to really face and find solutions. Well, that is the situation in Turkish context, but there are many other countries are also taking their lessons from the comparative student achievement exams. Well, okay, that is another nominee concept, culture, that I'm going to talk. I'm just trying to use my time efficiently because I would like to receive your questions at the end. Culture is quite complex and quite an interesting term. One of the best terms, best explanations or definitions that I come up was Barbara Rogov. She defined culture as common practice of certain communities. Common practice of certain communities. Although this is succinct and brief definition, it really compiles within it many important dimensions of this notion as well. The first thing we got to really realize that culture is quite a living thing. Culture is something that forces us to make it as exist, make it alive. It is, James Wirsch call it collective knowing, collective remembering, collective thinking. It's a kind of, all of our ideas come together in the air, producing an aura and then imposing certain kind of atmosphere. And that atmosphere forces us to perform actions in particular ways. That is really quite forcing, powerful thing. And for the purpose of existence, culture do many things. It really works like mafia or something. It gives you rewards. It could attempt to punish you, as my father tried to do. This pistachio farm, because I'm not quite keen on to perform this practice. And my father said, oh boy, if you don't follow my requirements, the pistachio farm is at stake. Okay, that I'll come on Mondays. I don't like pistachio, but it's a quite high price, so I have to take care about it. And it also gives stature for the people who perform the way the culture describes. It transforms really our thinking, the way we conceptualize the world, the conceptual horizons it imposes on us. And it has this transformative power, especially for the newcomers. For example, when you start working in a new school, you somehow find yourself doing particular things that you didn't imagine before working in that particular institution. Somehow you become, active. Somehow you ask questions, why am I doing this? Why bother doing this? And in other schools, people have totally different spirits. And that is all about culture. I am going to give into details, but, whoops, that must call attention, please. Everybody's all right? Nice. Okay. When we delve into the idea, the notion of culture, they always come up with at least 4 particular components that describes and define the notion of culture. The first one is rituals, the second one histories, the third one is tools, and the fourth one is discourses. All of these 4 makes a huge contribution and in fact, indispensable part of the notion of culture. Ritual, as you remember this definition, practices. Practices refers to social dimension of culture, and ritual, it's not any kind of socialization. It is ritualized social way of communication, so being socialization. And let me make something quite important clear, that community could be as small as a family, or it could be as large as a school district, or it might be even a city. It might be even a country. For example, British sense of humor, you know, Turkish way of living, Japanese way of, you know, performing, and that kind of German thinking. These are all tools or products of cultural understandings, and culture really shouldn't be confined with just, you know, some small science communities. It could be really as large as a country as well. So when we think in that way, schools are openly and discernibly cultural institutions. Right, histories. I'll talk about this in a while, but history, any social practice, any ritual takes time to become ritualized. Okay, let me repeat it. Any socialization takes time to become rituals. So histories are indispensable and defining part of culture as well. Tools, humans are tool-using animals. Tools are so important that it is concretized ideas that we solve problems. Then we consider that innovation is producing something new to do it something better. So we have to really employ tools. Tools, we can really define it in a wide variety of senses, including semiotic tools, so something that we perform certain actions like this presenting tool as well. And discourses. Every single community has their own way of thinking, way of communicating, way of expressing themselves. So distinguishing features becomes discourses for particular communities as well. Right, when we come to the school context, okay, I'm just keeping the time as well. We can witness many different rituals, practicing every single day over and over again. Ritual, for example, teachers' instruction practices, quotidian meetings, school dissemination activities, and parent meetings, end of year activities, and so on. We can add up to this list as well. But the thing is that rituals has this temptation to be repeated. We as teachers, through our education lives and our professional experiences, instilled with idea to reproduce particular practices. And that is a real danger, real threat in making an innovation in an institution. Because it is easy, it is because we know how to perform it, because we get used to doing it. So why we want to change something? And rituals, really, we can't really change the culture from traditional one to the innovative one unless we make rituals innovative. Right. As I say, I am not great fan of doing everything different and let's innovate this, let's renovate this. But the thing is that if we want to reproduce particular practices, we got to rationalize. We got to really understand what it brings to our institutions, what it brings to our instructional practices, what it brings to our students' lives. And if we can really produce meaningful answers, not only based on backgrounds and beliefs, then we can make a difference. But I briefly going to present here that certain principles that researchers working on innovation repeatedly refer. The first one is teamwork. Well, it is really common term, and we always come up with this term, and it seems common sense. It seems self-evident. Yeah, of course, we got to do teamwork. But research repeatedly established one fact that people, while doing teamwork, they just sharing the tasks and performing this task side by side. Not there is really a real teamwork, but what real teamwork requires? Interdependence. Interdependence is so magical. It involves so many different ideas and devotions and an intention to perform certain actions really together. It's not doing side by side and performing certain things because we share this task and it's my duty and I completed my job. It really is more than a lot more than execution of particular tasks in a given certain order. Right, constructive, productive questioning, search for the better. That's quite an interesting because people or member of a team keep questioning all the time, whatever practice, whatever decision, whatever happening, they become a nuisance. They become really people hard to work with. So the intention with the constructive and productive questioning refers to real intention to find a better solution, a better way of performing certain actions. In that sense, every team member or every particular teachers or administrators in an educational institution really produce constructive questions to seek out the ways for better practices. Spending time and reflection. Oh God, that is the least thing that we tend to perform somehow, because sparing time, because we always immersed in, the institutional tasks and the works and, things to do. And when we leave the school, we always feel relieved and really don't want to take time anymore to think about what we are going to do, what we've done, and what we can do for a betterment. So sparing time and doing reflection is sine qua non for an improvement. And patience and tolerance and ideas and people, we got to really make it an sensible balance here. Whoever produced an idea really doesn't make a difference unless they are sincere and trying to make a difference for the better functioning of this institution. We got person with sufficient and necessary patience and understanding with their ideas has real opportunity to innovate their practices. Well, that is the most apparent to me danger in front of innovation, because we people and teachers somehow tend to self-censor our ideas and our intentions for all sorts of reasons. Somehow, sometimes it happens that we don't want to be rejected. Sometimes we don't want to be ashamed by the comments that we receive when expressing our ideas. So all sorts of psychological reasons and atmosphere or communicational reasons, all sorts of reasons, we tend to self-censor our ideas. And if an institution doesn't really create an environment in which people or teachers can openly share ideas, then there is no chance for innovation. Professionalism and emotion management teaching is emotion-heavy profession. I do accept that. Because we are giving our lives to make student lives. We are disseminating, we are somehow putting our efforts into teachers' bringing up process, their education. And so we somehow develop expectations, emotional expectations as well, but we shouldn't forget that teaching is a profession and we got to really communicate and take this job as a profession. Efforts and results. we had to really find a balance to produce value. For example, in one of our research, one mathematics teachers did classroom activities spanning over to lesson time. And he did many, many different things, and he brought into the classroom different materials, and he organized students. He's for laughing, enjoying themselves. And the lesson completed. The single most important question was why all these fuss was all about. And he said, didn't they have fun? Oh yeah, they had fun, but the purpose is not just having fun. There must be something else, you've got to communicate. You've got to really give a real message. What was the message of the lesson? So we got to really find a balance between our efforts and expected results. Right, tools. I know I am being boring. So let's talk about something different. Promoting. I knew exactly when I'm making presentation, it will be halfway through my presentation, and I will think that probably my audience will get bored. So why keep talking innovation and culture and all that kind of stuff? And I found something interesting, pole vault. Not much interested. Right. Anyway, at least I tried, Anybody interested in pole vaulting? I knew that. I should have guessed that. But anyway, I may make interesting. Well, let me try. Okay. If I give you a bit of history of pole vaulting, you may be interested, right? Yeah, why not? Pole vaulting history. You should tell your friends, go to your innovation congress because they are talking about pole vaulting. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about pole vaulting. Pole vault is a track and field competition in which athletes attempt to jump over an elevated crossbar by vaulting themselves up and over it with a long, flexible pole. Anybody tried? Don't do this at home. Yeah, it's not quite suggestible. I didn't try, but we know that pole vault has become part of London Gymnastics Society's games in 1826. At that time, the first played this game. By the way, it is 1850s. It is spread in Netherlands, for example, Germany. People just loved it. Yeah, they loved it. It is a medal event at the Olympic Games since 1896. Interesting, not yet, okay. But pole. You see, it becomes interesting from every slide. At the very start, at the very beginning, hickory or solid ash poles were used for, vaulting. The first record was 3.30 meters, but not registered. The people were talking about, there were some rumors and murmurs going around. Oh, did you hear that somebody, jumped over 330? Oh, I can't believe it. Yeah, that was true. That kind of, people were talking and chatting, but that was never really witnessed. What happened was in 1896, William Hoyt is the first athlete officially registered to record at 330. And people really believed that, yeah, it was possible because it's not easy, 330. With a stick, you've got to really jump over. It's not quite an easy job. At the beginning of just the turn of 20th century, hickory poles changed with bamboo poles because they were more flexible. And Cornelius, did you ever heard of this name? I don't know. He is known to be the greatest of all pole vaulting. I can't believe it, I'm talking about this. Anyway, because I put it my slides, I have to really talk because otherwise I could finish too early. I didn't want this. Right. The record was interestingly increased to 4.77 by Cornelius in 1942. But this interesting thing was that this record was not broke until 1957. So even Cornelius himself didn't break his records. Yeah, that was interesting. So let me tell you that in almost 15 years, this record was not broken. And somehow, with the use of aluminum poles, someone called Robert Gutowski broke the record by 1 centimeter in 1957. Yeah. What do you imagine the reaction of Cornelius? He's known to be the greatest of all time. And Gutowski is using another pole made of aluminum and steel, amalgam of steel as well. How would you feel if you were, Cornelius? What will be your reaction? Would you applaud, oh boy, you did a great job, you deserve this? Would you say that? Or would you say something? Would you have a reaction or objection? Come on, put yourself in his shoes. You're known for like 15 years, the greatest of all time, and somehow someone comes with a different, pole and break your records. You wouldn't have difficulties accept it, right? He did also difficulties accepting this. After 1960s, fiberglass poles were inserted to the games, and the record increased tremendously from 478 to 621 by 143 centimeters. It's amazing. It's just really questioning as well. People were questioning, come on, hold on a minute. How can you really compare this to pole vaulting? Because they are not using the same pole that I was using. Funny thing is that change of the pole material always filled heated debates about whether vaulters really did pole vaulting. And the Cornelius himself held certain campaigns against, nearly broken records. And he was talking that their records should be cancelled. What do you think? Do you think that real pole vaulting can be achieved on the bamboo poles, ash poles, hickories? The interesting thing was that against these campaigns, there was TV shows. They were having open quarrels on the TV, and the new record breakers invited and challenged Cornelius. Okay, if it is all about pool, take it, you jump. Cornelius didn't do it, couldn't do it. He tried, yeah. He tried, but he couldn't do it. So, well, the situation in education is different or similar? We have to really ask that question. Cornelius, you know what he did? He opened a school. He opened a school in the United States and in Canada, particularly teaching pole vaulting with bamboo poles in 1960s, despite the fact that Olympics allowed, fiberglass poles. Why do you insist teaching students or potential athletes performing with the bamboo poles? What is the point? Because he believed that pole vaulting could only be done, or that is the only way, that should be the only way, using bamboo poles. That is really eye-opening. He is known to be the greatest of all time, but he insists, certain belief that pole vaulting can only be done with bamboo poles. What if we are doing the similar practices for our students, despite the fact that our students are not going to be challenged by the way that we bring up our students? What if we as teachers teaching our students how to use bamboo poles, despite the fact that they have never had to use these poles in real events? Well, there is something called teaching orientations. And teachers has certain ideas rooted on their, strong beliefs that, for example, mathematics should be performed in that way. Science should be taught in that way. I can't consider a student knowing science unless they do this and this and the other thing. What if our ideas, what if our beliefs are not really reflecting current thinking? Look, I'm talking about something here. It's really not an easy task for none of us, because on one hand, I wouldn't like to sound rejection cultural traditions and cultural understandings rooted on, years of experiences. On the other hand, there's a force of change, because nothing is the same anymore. So you see, my audience is. Yeah. All right. That is not an easy task for none of us. Even we are researcher, even we are practitioner, we are policymaker. Where should be the fine lines between tradition and innovation? And that really, we have to answer this question. To me, the real question here is, okay, I insist certain actions, performance of certain practices at the price of what? Right? At the price of what? If I insist on using bamboo pools at the price of losing Olympic medals, then I've got to really change the way that I'm thinking or the way I am approaching to my practice. So there is a real correction. And there are all sorts of different tools all around us. Tasks, for example, instructional tasks that we choose while performing our practices. There are new tools. There are many different new tools. There are tasks that lead students rote learning, recitation. On the other hand, there are tasks, rich tasks, that allow students making new connections and making their own understandings through appropriating materials. There are all sorts of different concrete materials, real-world objects, visual manipulatives, softwares and web tools, and chalk and talk. Yeah, that is the longest available tool. And are we really heavily depending still on chalk and talk? I am not against chalk and talk. Please, I have to make myself clear. I'm just against blindly promotion of use of certain tools. So we got to really answer what benefits are we are aiming to introduce into students' development. To answer this question, I said at the beginning of my presentation, sparing time and reflection is a prerequirement. That was what I really intend to mean. Well, historical development, cultural psychologists and anthropologists talks about three different parallel lines of historical development: phylogenetic development, ontogenetic development, and microgenetic development. I'm not going to get into greater details here, but the relevant idea here is related to ontogenetic development, which refers to a person's or an organization's development from start to the end, from birth to death, right? So it refers to differences in the practices of different periods of time and impositions of causes, conditions to change. When we try to understand the innovation culture, we have to really ask that question. The correct question here is, what I was doing 10 years ago, what I am doing now? What I was doing 5 years ago, what I am doing now? What I did last year and what I am doing this year. And we got to really compare and see what differences we are introducing. You know what? You know why? Simple. Because the generation is now different from our times. I am I assume that many of you are quite familiar with generation studies. But there is something quite important I would like to share with you. A scientist called Prof in 1960s studied duplication time of scientific knowledge in particular fields. He was a chemist and he studied the duplication time of scientific knowledge in the field of chemistry. What he found was that duplication time changes 13 to 15 years. Please, that is really key here, 13 to 15 years. That means that, in fact, Price's law, he didn't really intend to produce a rationale for generational studies, but his duplication time year span was taken as a reference point for generation studies. The idea behind generation studies is that every 13 to 15 years, a new generation with distinctive features comes and they have really borders and they can really distinguishable with certain actions and certain ideas and certain qualities. And so the generation studies starting from 1960s took Price's 13 to 15 years as a reference to divide into generations. There are also baby boomers, generation X, generation Y, generation Z, and the current generation called generation Alpha. As you can see, these generations are separated like 13 to 15 years. So if you are born in generation Y and you are teaching generation Z, you've got to really find ways to fill this gap, to respond to the needs and expectations, or to find the common base to communicate your students. You know what is the funny? The funny thing is that at the moment, Price's law studies repeated. And what we found that duplication time of scientific knowledge base reduced to 3 to 5 years, certain areas, and so 8 months to technology-related fields. You know what does that mean? If we take Price's law as reference point, then the difference between generations reduced to like 3 years or something. We can't really wait 15 years to face a new generation. Every single year, maybe every single 3 years, every other 3 years, every other 4 years, our students becomes a new generation. And we got to really find a fine balance to respond to the challenges of expectations and understandings and qualities of these new generations. It is not an easy task for none of us. I'm aware of that. But we can't really simply ignore that. We can't really simply ignore that our students are born into a world which we haven't envisioned in our childhood. And thinking that our students are going to become the workforce like 10 years later, and if we are preparing our students with our understandings that we gained like 10 years ago, so we are apparently making it 20 years of gap that our students are expected to fill, which is almost an impossibility for most of us, not only our students. And Generation Alpha has a lot of difficulties because of the exposures they are facing, reduced attention span, concentration, less time for socializing, less development of creativity and imagination, and reduced ability to achieve happiness and that kind of things. And many of these issues were not as common before as we are facing now. You see? And you know what happened? During the pandemic, we have faced to use emergency remote teaching. But it wasn't distant learning. Emergent phenomena, and we have to really perform distance teaching. And the single most important issue discussed, debate all around the world was one thing, online examinations, because our students were cheating, because our students were not reflecting their real ideas, because their friends were answering the questions, and because parents were helping them. But again, if we are asking knowledge-based questions, if we are asking questions that expected of memory, depending on the memory, relying on the memory, there is Google. You know, you can Google and find every answer. So we got to really change the way we perform our instructions. That past 2 years, the pandemic showed all of us that we have to really face the realities of current days. And Alpha generation doesn't really like it, because what is the point of knowing so many things if they are already available on my smartphone? You see? So we have to really reflect and find or update our teaching practices, our understandings, our perspectives to reflect, you know, to respond our students' needs and expectations. I'm going to finish in a minute. There are discourse, distinguishing one committee from the other, and discourse also changed. I'm not going to talk about great details here, but let me briefly mention that school is not any more learning place. It is multi-developmental site. Not only cognitive development at stake, we are expecting our students to develop in multidimensional ways. Not within the borders, beyond the walls. Schools are not closed systems. When our students get into school, it is closed. Quite the contrary, and transparency and visibility becomes really the defining features of the schools now. Teacher, they are not presenting ideas. They are not expected to present. They are expected to get students engaged, you know, mentally, physically, you know, bodily engaged in learning tasks. It's not something performed individually, but rather performed jointly. And teachers are not intuitive decision makers. They are expected to be rational designers. And students, they are not expected to increase their knowledge. They expect to self-fulfill themselves, to realize their own potentials. They are expected to develop literacy skills in all sorts of subject matter areas, not just accumulation of knowledge. Right, that is the history of learning theories. In the turn of the century until now, the learning theories emphasized initially behavior, and then the cognition, then emotion, then the duplicate matches, and at the moment we expect our students to perform certain actions thoughtfully and sensibly with the emotion and produce something really skillfully. We are called these now productive agency. And I am going to finish in a minute, but I'm going to finish after this slide. Of course, apparently teachers are the key actors in making changes. I know there is a heavy burden placed on the shoulder of teachers. I know that teachers are always expected of something great, and we are also aware that teachers are really the key actors who can make a real difference. So at the moment, we are living in an age, information, knowledge society, that we cannot really train in terms of initial teacher preparation. We cannot really design continuous professional development in responding to the needs of teachers in this era, because every single day, so diverse ideas, so diverse needs are, you know, emerging that nobody can really manage teachers' continuous professional development. So what is expected of teachers is that self-sustained professional development. Teachers are responsible for their own development. 21st century is a strange century that taught us one thing quite clearly, that we are not going to retire from the professions, that we doing the same practices, producing the same practices at the time that we started to work. We have to change, we have to perform different actions, and we can't really continue working by repeating ourselves over the years. And that is why self-sustained, tailor-made, not one-size-fits-all approaches, but tailor-made developmental approaches that teachers really adopt to sustain, to develop, to make come into being the innovative culture in educational institutions. When it comes to my father, I am not going to innovate his culture because he's happy and he doesn't have an aim to make a difference in people's lives. That is the only place that we can really leave people as they feel happy. Thank you very much for your attention. Well, we got a couple of minutes to receive questions.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Professor Mehmet Fatih Özmantar, for his very beneficial presentation. Thank you so much, Professor. And now I want to welcome Professor Yahuda Parshalom. His topic is the importance of empathy in higher education setting. With your class, please welcome Mr. Professor Yahuda Parshalom.
Soru cevap kısmı olacak benim. 5 dakika kadar. Soru cevap kısmı yok ondan sonra.
Have a couple of minutes.